Hello there. Welcome in. Glad to have you, whether you're listening on Extra Sports 1300, 740 KVOR, or you're listening on the streaming apps of those two fine radio stations, which are widely available. And the best part is they're free to download, free to use, and sponsored by Diversus Health, mental health, and well being for all. A veritable cornucopia of hockey topics. That's other than one football game that was announced. It's going to be all hockey today, which to me is maybe the best version of this show that it can be. I'd love to get your thoughts at 719 247 1313. You can call or text into the show. Producer Ray is standing by. Let's not waste any more time. As we talk about this Avs Wild series, we've kind of had three different games so far leading into last night, right? Game one, gong show. Don't know how much you could take from that game, if I'm being honest. Two, Avalanche imposed their will. Pretty comfortable win over Minnesota. Game three, Avs don't have it. Wild super desperate. Minnesota wins, kind of going away. So given that, you couldn't really, with 100% certainty, say, what the real indicator of this series is going to be. And it's crazy because it's 3 games in. Like, it's almost, even if it goes 7, it's like almost halfway over, right? So you didn't quite get a good gauge on where these teams were in relationship to one another. I think you do now after game 4. And I think the reality here is that the gap between the Avalanche and the Wild is a significant one. Certainly closer than it was between the Avalanche and the Kings, but I think we have enough to go on now to just say that the Avalanche are that much better than Minnesota. Here's Jared Bednar on the difference to him between game 3 and game 4. What Jared Bednar is saying there is when the Avalanche apply themselves, right? Commit to playing at the level and the style you need to in order to win in the Stanley Cup playoffs. They're much better than Minnesota is. It's as simple as that. Game 4, to me, most resembled game 2 more than game 1 or game 3, with the Avalanche imposing their will for the vast majority of that game. Minnesota's game plan coming in, you would have to imagine, was to test Mackenzie Blackwood early and often, right? The guy hadn't started a hockey game in a month. It reasons that you should be trying to pepper this guy. They had 21 shots in the game. 21. And they went, I saw this from Sportsnet Canada, they went over an hour of real time, a real hour out of your life without putting a shot on goal. Think about that for a moment. Not even a grade A chance, not even going 63 minutes without scoring a goal. They went 63 minutes of actual human time without getting a shot that Mackenzie Blackwood had to do anything with. In Minnesota, the game was in their building at home, and the Avalanche did this to them. My youngest son graced me with his presence. Not a big hockey guy. Decided to watch with me out of the kindness of his heart. He's watching the game and he's watching the score bug on ESPN. And he's looking at the shots. And I can tell he is. And then he just, like, all of a sudden, I think the separation at that time was 20-4 in favor of the Avs. And he turns to me and he says, when is Minnesota going to try and shoot the puck? They were trying. That was my answer to him. They're trying. They can't get a decent shot in. I had to tell him, it's shots on goal. But I said they're trying, and they can't. The Avalanche completely dominated the second period of that hockey game. And for the game in its entirety, they beat Minnesota in every statistical category you could possibly think of, save for one. And it was block shots. Minnesota had them beat there. Why? Block shots, I mean, good on them, but also aren't block shots an indicator of how the Avalanche were dominating the game, that Minnesota had to throw their body in front of so many pucks? That was the only statistical category I found that anybody cares about, that the Avalanche were not better than Minnesota last night. And I heard some of this last night and into today. Well, and it's a normal caveat we throw on things, right? When it comes to hockey, you get the empty net goals that can make a game look different, right? You just wake up, you look at the box score, and you say, wow, Avs won 5-2. That was a pretty comfortable win. And people are saying, well, the two empty netters at the end kind of made it a little more lopsided than the game really was. Respectfully, I disagree. I think the scoreboard before the two empty netters didn't tell the story. I don't think that game was a 3-2 game. And in some ways, it fed into my fear that I shared on the show yesterday about the Avs responding from game 3 and still getting a bad bounce of the puck that ultimately makes them lose the game. 3-2 wasn't indicative of where that game was. I would say the 5-2 scoreline, even though two of the goals were empty netters, I would say that tells more of the story, gives you a more accurate description of how much better Colorado was than Minnesota. Now, the separation between these two teams might be the revelation here. But the idea that the Avalanche were going to be night and day different than they were in game 3, that should not be a revelation. And I tried all show long yesterday to calm you down a little bit if you're an Avs fan that was panicking over game 3. They were always going to respond because they always respond. Their performance last night, just if you just look at them, don't compare it to Minnesota. Just say Avs game 3 to Avs game 4. That shouldn't have been a surprise. They always answer back. This team hasn't lost back-to-back games since early March. They always respond when they need to. And here's the captain, Gabriel Landeskog, on why they bounce back so often. But here's the thing with what Gabriel Landeskog said. Because I know there's a Minnesota side to the story, and John Hines talked a little bit. We'll get to that audio a little bit later. But, the criticisms around the Avalanche performance in game 3 completely warranted. But which team, like legitimately, which team needed that game more? The Avalanche or the Wild? So Gabriel Landeskog's talking about that we knew the stakes. The stakes are they take absolute control of this series. And even at 2-2, it's a best of 3 series, and 2 of the games are at Ball Arena. And it just speaks to the mentality of this hockey team. And look, there are exceptions to it. There are off nights. Game 3 was an off night for this team. But what you just heard from Gabriel Landeskog is how the Avalanche have been conducting themselves through almost 90 games now. They didn't have more on the line last night than Minnesota did. They would have liked to win. It would behoove them to win. They didn't have to win. Minnesota had to win. And yet the mentality of the Colorado Avalanche is no, we need to win. We need this one. We need it. Not we want it, we need it. And look, seasons are long, even the playoffs are long. Right? What game 3 did, because they are, as much as they operate like machines sometimes, they are human. And what happened in game 3 was a human moment where they could just not muster the want to, the desire, the work, whatever you want to call it, that Minnesota did, and that was required. And again, the criticism of them in game 3 is completely warranted. But what game 3 served was as this moment for the Avs to lock back in. Right? Every season, even one for the President's Trophy winning team, has ebbs and flows. You go through tough stretches, rough road trips, whatever the case might be. You might be feeling yourself a little bit after. So we talked about this team before the Olympic break, looked like they had a bit of senioritis. But the best teams use those stretches to say, all right, that's enough. It's time for us to lock back in. And I think that's what game 3 was. Maybe they were feeling themselves a little bit. They were 3 days between games. They were being told how unstoppable they were, while Minnesota was being told how desperate they needed to be and how much they needed to win game 3. But the performance in game 3 was not up to the standards of Jared Bednar or anybody on the Colorado Avalanche. And to a man, they said enough. And Devon Taves, normally a soft-spoken guy, as many hockey players are, but I think it was so matter of fact, and we played that audio yesterday, but he was so matter of fact of like, yeah, of course we're going to lock back in. Yeah, we just need to get back to our game. We're good. And it wasn't just the thing that you say. It's what this Avalanche team has been all year. No, we'll get back to our game. You don't have to worry about that. Well, you don't, because they controlled that hockey game for the vast majority of it. They win, take a 3-1 series lead, and I'll just put it out right now. We got plenty of time today and tomorrow to discuss. I don't think this series is getting back to St. Paul. I don't. I think this team can maintain that level into game 5. And when this team locks in, they're incredible. They're an incredible team to watch top to bottom. And you find yourself going, oh, it can't be that easy. People tried all year to make the Central Division a real race. The race was between Dallas and Minnesota. Colorado was above both of them for the entire season. And it was only the ghosts of playoff past that made Avalanche fans nervy about matching up with Dallas again. But if you took this season on its own, which is difficult to do, but if you looked at it on its own, I think you would be able to assess why the Avalanche, who are different than they were a year ago, some of their personnel is different. Dallas the same way. You could see where maybe this Dallas team doesn't match up with this Colorado team maybe as well. But that's an alternate universe. Plus, you throw in the fact that even if you don't believe that Mikko Rantanen was playing with the torn MCL. So I don't know how Dallas would have fared, but we didn't get that. We got Minnesota. Fair play to Minnesota. They beat Dallas. They earned their way into this spot, but they're not on the Avalanche level. This team is better than they were a year ago. And in terms of them making it look easy, they make it look easy. It's not easy. And that's something I want to stress. And it even came up in the LA series in the Avs push back against this notion that just because it was a sweep, it was easy. No. It's not that it's easy for them. It's that when they lock in, when they play at their peak, they are just more talented, deeper, faster, stronger than most of the teams they go up against, and it looks easy. They work hard to make it look easy. And the Avs made it look easy with some an ever-changing lineup. It changed more than we thought it would going into the game, and now we know why all that was. Let's get into that conversation coming up next on 740 KVOR and Extra Sports 1300. So now we know that it's a 3-1 series lead for the Avs going into tomorrow night's game 5. So a chance to close out the series, move on to the Western Conference final. Great place for you to potentially witness the Avs do that is the Brass Tap on Bass Pro Drive. I will be doing this program there tomorrow afternoon between 3 and 6, leading you right up into puck drop. Come pregame for what is now a closeout game potentially, and see what we've been talking about. The Brass Tap on Bass Pro Drive. That is tomorrow afternoon, 3 till 6, or in this case, 3 till puck drop between Colorado and Minnesota. More on last night's game. I think the biggest winner out of last night's 5-2 win was Jared Bednar, because Jared Bednar once again showed that you would be hard pressed to find another coach, and I'll go beyond the NHL, right? I cover a lot of different leagues and a lot of different teams. There are few coaches that routinely show how in touch they are with their team, how much their finger is squarely on the pulse of their team, and they know exactly who should play, who they should play with to get the most out of them. He knows what buttons to push. And Mackenzie Blackwood, for most people, is going to be the headliner from that, right? Last night, questions about whether it was the right move. I asked some questions as well, given everything that Scott Wedgwood had done in the playoffs to that point. And I don't know that you noticed a big difference if I didn't tell you that Mackenzie Blackwood hadn't started a game in a month, or there was another goaltender that was the number one for the Avs to that point. You probably wouldn't be able to tell the difference. Here's Jared Bednar on the play of Mackenzie Blackwood. But the thing is, to me, it's not about Mackenzie Blackwood, because this is something I brought up yesterday. We can have our opinions on whether Wedgwood or Blackwood should start. And I would say I was in the camp of starting Scott Wedgwood. But I did say that it's not going to matter as much who is in goal if the guys in front of them did the job. Right? If the Avs played better in game 4 than they did in game 3, it would matter less who is in goal. And that is where I want to give most of the credit to Jared Bednar. Blackwood faced 21 shots in that game, and like 2 of them were grade A chances. Or 2 of them, the 2 goals, to Mackenzie Blackwood's credit, or in defense of Mackenzie Blackwood, I don't know what he does with either. One was redirected. The other one was a great feed from Quinn Hughes to Sturm. I'm not putting those goals on Mackenzie Blackwood. But in terms of the shots that he faced that he could do something about but were a little bit difficult to save, I had like 2. That was it. And even Eric Johnson said on the broadcast that other than that one flurry, I think it was early in the third period, Mackenzie Blackwood hadn't done much. The mixing and matching of these lines, especially given the circumstances that we were only privy to shortly before puck drop, that's what impressed me most about what Jared Bednar did. We didn't know Arturi Lehkonen and Sam Malinsky were going to be out. And just to update you on what's going on with the 2 of them, upper body dinged up in game 3, day-to-day, not long-term. there's the most in-depth injury report you're ever going to get from Jared Bednar. But with those two guys out, and they're both important players. Arturi Lehkonen is a guy that is definitely in the top six, sometimes on the top line. So for him to be able, and he probably knew before we did, but still for him to be able to mix and match the lines and find the right combinations, I thought the Avs rolled four lines last night. I thought every line brought something to the table last night. And even in the Avs wins in these playoffs, I can't say that every single night. I thought every line served a purpose. Every line did a job and helped the Avalanche win that hockey game. And even that second line, centered by Brock Nelson, that has been much maligned. It was him and Nichushkin. He moves Nichushkin down to the third line, puts Nick Waugh up there, moves up Ross Colton because of the injury to Arturi Lehkonen, and that second line is terrific. Ross Colton ends up scoring a go-ahead goal in the game. And I'm listening to Jared Bednar, and he talks like this all the time. The closest thing I would compare it to is, you know, that scene in The Last Dance where Dennis Rodman is explaining rebounding? It's an engrossing scene from that documentary. I like, and it lives in my brain and will forever live in my brain. The virtuoso that Dennis Rodman is, taking away all the other stuff that people didn't really like. The guy understood rebounding at a level I didn't even think rebounding was that complicated. You know, most rebounding is effort. That's what we're always told, right? And that's a big part of it. But Dennis Rodman can read the ball coming off the rim and knowing exactly where he needed to be. It's the same when I hear Jared Bednar talk about line combinations. I mean, this might make me a huge nerd when it comes to this stuff, but I could listen to him talk about line combinations all day because he's like, if I move Nichushkin down, then I'm going to need this on the second line. So I'm going to move Nick Waugh up. And I remember a game in January where Nick Waugh and Brock Nelson played very well together. So I'm going to put them back together and I'm going to, do this and do that. Like everything has a reason. He can explain every single move he makes. He doesn't just throw someone onto a line hoping for the best. Everything has a reason. And the whole, if you want to call it that one move creates, he knows what to do with that. He moves somebody up or down. Probably has a priority list. I got to get Nichushkin going or I got to get Brock Nelson going. So I'm going to move this guy here. Well, that creates something here. So I'm going to put this guy here. It's like a expert chess player. Like if I go there, then you're probably going to go here, and then I'm going to go here, and then you're like anticipating all of these, the butterfly effect of one single move or one injury. Like Jared Bednar, he has it all covered. But what I keep coming back to with the Avs in these playoffs and with Jared Bednar and his lineup decisions, I just keep going back to the fourth line. They moved Logan O'Connor up to the third line last night. They put in Yoel Kiviranta, and he fits in incredibly well. Here's Parker Kelly explaining Kiviranta's fit and also his what proved to be the game-winning goal that Parker Kelly scored. And they did, and it was such an Avs fourth line sequence leading to Parker Kelly's goal, and Parker Kelly explained it better than I could. But you saw, and you're like, that's the Avs fourth line. That's what they do. And what, just as a bit of an aside here, how about Parker Kelly's season? The extension of his season. He scores 20 goals, and his first career playoff goal, which was last night, could not have been a bigger one, given the Avs a 3-1 lead in this 3-1 lead in this series. The Colorado Avalanche have the best fourth line in hockey, bar none. And it sounds like a small thing, but it's not, because it makes so much of the difference. Right? You could talk about Nathan MacKinnon and Cale Makar, and perhaps they are the best at what they do. There's a debate with MacKinnon. I don't think there's a debate with Cale Makar. But you say, oh, it's MacKinnon and Makar that make them go. And to a certain extent, you're right. But think about it. There's Connor McDavid. There's, there's Quinn Hughes. There's Zach Werenski. Like Austin Matthews maybe before this year. Jack Eichel in Vegas. Like Leon Draisaitl. Like there's other players that you may not think are necessarily better than Nathan MacKinnon or Cale Makar, but they bring a very similar impact. Nobody in the NHL has a fourth line like the Avs do. Nobody does. And there's a very simple reason for it. I think that Jared Bednar and Chris McFarland, the GM of the Colorado Avalanche, just care about their fourth line more than any other team in the NHL. I'm convinced that is the reasoning. They just care. They want a very specific identity. They want very specific types of players, and they have 4 of them, as Kiviranta showed last night. Yeah, it's Drury, it's Kelly, and it's O'Connor, but you could put Kiviranta in, as they did last night, and they can play much the same way. I just think they prioritize it at a higher level. And you think about some of the moves that the Avs have made over the last couple of years. Jack Drury's inclusion in the Mikko Rantanen trade he wasn't a throw-in. Maybe we viewed him that way because we were focused on Natchez for McKinnon, or Natchez for Rantanen, excuse me. Jack Drury's inclusion in that trade was on purpose. There was a vision for him. I keep going back to the Charlie Coyle trade, which, as an aside, Charlie Coyle signed an extension in Columbus, so they may have just really liked Charlie Coyle. But yes, it was, I think, to give him financial flexibility, but I think it also speaks to the identity Jared Bednar wants in his bottom 6 as a whole. And I thought Charlie Coyle would have been a perfect fit for that. And maybe to some degree he was, but if Jared Bednar wanted Charlie Coyle to stay on the team, he probably would have still been here. And it's not an indictment on Charlie Coyle. Again, it's just how specific Jared Bednar is when it comes to what he wants on his depth lines and who he wants on those depth lines. And like anything in life that you probably spend more time caring about than most people, you beam with pride about it. Right? I think that Jared Bednar loves his fourth line more than he loves the line MacKinnon plays on. I legitimately believe that. He just said the other day that he essentially does the same thing that maybe you do to your kid, or maybe you don't. Maybe I do it. I don't want to shame anybody here. It's probably not the best practice, but you ever pull out the line, why can't you be more like your brother? Or why can't you be more like your sister? That's what Jared Bednar does with the fourth line. He's just said this like yesterday or the day before. He was like, I show all the other lines the fourth line, and I say, be like them. He loves that fourth line. And why wouldn't he? The way that they produce, no other fourth line in the NHL produces and is as impactful as the Avs fourth line. And another sign of how much Jared Bednar loves that fourth line, not only was Parker Kelly in that fourth line on the ice for the eventual game-winning goal, when Minnesota pulled their goalie and was trying to come back in that game, guess who was on the ice? The fourth line. Here's Parker Kelly on being able to close out the game for the Colorado Avalanche. With all due respect, I don't think it can be. Not to disparage any of the other lines, but I think Parker Kelly is selling himself and his line short. I think they are out there because of the level of trust Jared Bednar has in them that is maybe higher on a night-to-night basis than it is with any other line. That they're going to do what they need to do. Now they are, and Jared Bednar's talked about this too, not in so many words, but he essentially said, like, look, Nathan MacKinnon is Nathan MacKinnon, right? These guys aren't as skilled as some of the other Avs players. They're not as talented, but they are the right blend of gritty and talented to be able to make an impact like they did last night. And I keep going back to this. If you really want to boil down why this Avs team is seemingly head and shoulders above everybody else in the West, I point to the fourth line before I point to Nathan MacKinnon. That's not to say that Nathan MacKinnon isn't a part of it, that Cale Makar isn't a part of it, but the fact that the Avalanche can truly roll four lines and all four lines can be impactful just as they were last night, it encapsulates better to me why the Avs are as good as they are, why they won the President's Trophy, why they became the first team in NHL history to both score the most goals in the league and allow the fewest. Because nobody else has what the Avs have on the fourth line. And they were incredibly impactful last night. Now, 719-247-1313 if you want to jump in on the conversation. Love to get your thoughts on game 3. And everybody loves the skill and the speed and goal scoring. We love talking about all that stuff. But we also love the goonery of the game, don't we? An in-depth discussion on butt ending next. Switchbacks FC back at Widener Field this Saturday night at 7, taking on New Mexico United for Salute to Service Night. Get your tickets at switchbacksfc.com. And I suppose I would be derelict in my duty as the voice of the club not to let you know that help me out, Ray. Who is this? Who does this person play on Ted Lasso? So is his real name Danny Rojas, or is that his name on the show? The actor that plays a character on Ted Lasso has signed, and this is not a goof, this is not an April Fool's joke, has signed a contract with El Paso Locomotive, who is in the USL Championship. And it just so happens that the Switchbacks are going to be hosting El Paso Locomotive on June 6th in the third match of the group stage of the USL Cup. This is a big deal to many people. I do not watch that show. I've been very clear about this over the years. So this doesn't affect me in the way it is affecting so many people in my life. And as far as I see it, if that gets you out to a Switchbacks game, I'm all for it. So, Ray, did you get? I thought you were chastising me for not being a Ted Lasso fan, and you don't even know who this guy is? Oh, okay. So it's not Jason Sudeikis. It's not the grumpy guy with the beard. It's who? Okay, but who help me, who is the player and who is the real life person and who is the character? Cristo Fernandez is his name on the show. Okay. Okay. I'm so confused by all of this. By June, no, I got it. By trust me, on June 6th, I will have the correct name and I won't call him by his character on Ted Lasso. But this is legitimate. Like, this is wild, by the way. Regardless of whether, if all of a sudden Shorzy was signing a 10-day contract with the Colorado Avalanche, that'd be kind of nuts. But apparently this guy played soccer growing up, was pretty good. And now he's a rival of the Switchbacks. So I don't know if he is a character that people enjoy. They do? Okay. Well, now you have to hate him because he doesn't play for the Switchbacks. He plays for El Paso. So June 6th. So while you're getting tickets for Saturday's match against New Mexico, go ahead and get tickets for June 6th as well. Although I have no control over who plays and who doesn't. But that's the next time El Paso Locomotive visits Colorado Springs. So there's that. We may have to continue the butt ending conversation after the top of the hour. I'm looking at the clock. But in the meantime, we'll take a text on the subject, 719-247-1313. Go ahead, Ray. Mm-hmm. So, butt ending is the official name of this infraction. And I got to tell you, Scott, I'm with you. Mike McCarron is with you. You'll hear from that gentleman coming up in a little bit. I was under the same impression. I thought if you took the butt end of your stick, which for people just tuning in, want to make sure that everybody's on the same page about what we're talking about here. You take the butt end of the stick and you try to jam it into the temple of your opponent, I was under the impression that that was a 5 minute major in a game misconduct, meaning Josh Manson gone. Now, apparently, because rule books are this way in professional sports, there are many definitions and degrees to which a call like this can be made. There is a rule on the books that says if on the ice, the referee cannot actually tell if a player hits the side of the face or the side of the head with the butt end of the stick. Meaning if Josh Manson, like swiped to try to like get McCarron off of him and the referee couldn't tell, then that's the double minor. And that's apparently what they called last night. Now, the NHL has come down and said Josh Manson is being fined the most money that we can fine somebody. No suspension, but the biggest fine, which for Josh Manson, $5,000. I don't know how that impacts him. I don't want to make light of $5,000 leaving anyone's pocket, but that's the maximum allowable fine. The NHL gave him that. I think it does leave open the possibility that Josh Manson should have been kicked out of the game. Now, I will say in the moment, that was a really dumb penalty. I did not like it at all. And given the way that that game went, that goal that Minnesota ended up scoring on that double minor, that stuck out for the rest of the game, right? The game wasn't as close as it should have been, and that goal could have made a huge difference. I hated what Josh Manson did. But apparently it was within the referee's purview to say it wasn't a 5 minute major, but maybe the NHL today slightly disagreeing with their on ice officials. We'll continue that discussion after the top of the hour. First, I want to get in a word for Low T Center. You know that feeling when something's just off, right? Maybe you're tired all the time, not sleeping well, or just not feeling like yourself. For a lot of guys, that's low testosterone. That's what that is. And that's where Low T Center comes in. They're the original TRT clinic, and they've helped guys all across the country, a lot of them in Colorado Springs, to get their energy, focus, and drive back. And here's the difference. They only use high-quality pharmaceutical-grade testosterone, no compounded mystery stuff. You know exactly what you're putting in your body. Plus, their providers are all board certified. They don't just look at your numbers. They actually get to know you, your goals, your lifestyle, everything, because they want to give you the highest level of care possible. And if you're interested in peptides, recovery, weight loss, better sleep, those kind of things, they can help you out with that too. It all gets started with a free testosterone test. So no risk, no downside. Head to lowtcenter.com to book that. That's lowtcenter.com. Get started with the fine folks at Low T Center. Coming up next, we continue our butt-ending conversation as the Avs take game 4 by a 5-2 score. Back after this. Welcome in. Glad to have you. Appreciate you watching this show. Anywhere you scroll at Extra Sports 1300 at 740 KVOR. If you follow me on social media, you can watch the show there as well at Gingerly Tweets on X and at GingeWatch on Instagram. While you're there, like, subscribe, comment, do all the things that we do with social media. I would greatly appreciate it. And my kids, honestly, my kids would greatly appreciate it, especially on YouTube, because every 3 days, my son brings up the fact, Dad, why don't you have more followers on YouTube? Because that's my worth to my child. Forget putting a roof over his head and allowing him to live all of his dreams and all the other stuff I do for him. My worth is only as many YouTube followers as I have. It's not even my YouTube. It's the station's. Has he checked out my Instagram? It's blowing up right now, but he doesn't care about that. Anyway, that's my own cross to bear. Let's talk some more hockey. Avs with the 5-2 win in Game 4. They push Minnesota to the brink of elimination. And before I get into it, why don't we hear from the opposing coach? Let's be fair, not equal time, but let's give some time to the Minnesota side of the story. Here's their head coach, John Hines, on why Minnesota lost in their own barn to fall down 3-1 in the series. And look, that's not dissimilar to some of the things that Jared Bednar said after Game 3. But I think last night was much more about the Avalanche imposing their will throughout the majority of that contest and being much better than the Minnesota Wild. That's what I choose as the reason why. I think the Avs will make a lot of teams feel that way, that they didn't have their best game, that they weren't doing the things they needed to do to win. I think it's because the Avs were, and the Avs weren't letting the Wild. That's my read on the whole thing. But the fact of the matter is, I'm glad that the two empty net goals went in, because it does tell a better story as far as the separation between the two teams. 3-2 doesn't do that Avs performance justice. I thought they were the much better team for the vast majority of that hockey game. And in a game that Minnesota still needed more than the Avs, I thought, dominated them. I really did. But it could have turned out to be what I foretold would be I didn't foretold it because I didn't think it would happen, but there was a possibility, right? Avs respond from Game 3, right? Much better effort. They do all the things they're supposed to be doing, details, all of that, all those buzz phrases that we've used throughout the playoffs, right? All that happens. Part of why we love hockey is it's sometimes completely random. And literally the bounce of a puck could decide a game. And for most of that game, even though if you did not look at the scoreboard, well, if you looked at the shots on goal on the scoreboard, it would tell you what was going on. But if you just watched the game, the Avalanche were the much better team. And then you look at the scoreboard and you would say, how are the Avs trailing? How are the Avs tied? How are the Avs only up by 1? And so it could have very well been that nightmare scenario in which a bad bounce goes Minnesota's way, Avs lose the game, and now you're looking back at Game 3 and you're saying now that is an even bigger mistake by the Colorado Avalanche to come out the way they did in game 3, because now the series is tied at 2, and there was a game that they absolutely gave up, which would have been game 3. They just did not give themselves a chance to win that game. Inexcusable at this point in the season. But that's what could have happened in game 4. So, but it also didn't have to be a bounce of the puck. It also could be just a really dumb penalty. And I'm going to go, I'm going to be on Josh Manson's side, but I'm also going to be on the opposite side of Josh Manson when it comes to that incident in the first period. I said this before the break. If you're just tuning in, I did not like Josh Manson doing that to Mike McCarron. There are penalties that you take that you can live with, even for a player like Josh Manson. He's a physical player. There are going to be times where he's going to commit a penalty of a physical nature. A roughing, a cross-checking, something like that. But you can live with those because he's making a hockey play. Right? He's trying to take someone off the puck. He's trying to keep someone from getting the puck, something like that. You live with those. You hate him, but you say, you know what? He's making a hockey play. Him swinging the butt end of his stick into the side of Mike McCarron's face is not a hockey play. And I just think that at the point of the game it was, allowing Minnesota to get the first goal on the board, or put the ability for Minnesota to get the first goal on the board, a tone-setting type of goal, it is what it could have been. I didn't like it at all from Josh Manson. And per Scott's text in the last segment, I think most of the hockey world thought that was an automatic 5 minutes in a game misconduct. And apparently there's a rule on the books that it doesn't necessarily have to be that if there's some doubt of whether the butt end of the stick struck an opposing player. But be that as it may, Josh Manson should not be doing that. And if you think I'm, being a curmudgeon about the whole thing and you like what Josh Manson did, just know that Jared Bednar, the head coach of the Colorado Avalanche, is on my side. Go ahead and play it, Ray. The undisciplined part is what I want you to focus on. So Jared Bednar, obviously a better grip of the rule book than many of the people watching that game last night. And I'm not saying that Josh Manson, look, if you're an Avs fan, I don't want to say the standard because that's like a positive connotation. We live in a world where we remember what Tom Bertuzzi did to Steve Moore, right? Like, we remember this. Okay, so what Josh Manson did, it's not assault. Okay, so I'm with Jared Bednar on that. I'm just saying it's a dumb penalty to take. It's an unnecessary penalty to take in a game of that magnitude. So that's where I'm not on Josh Manson's side on that. For the rest of this segment, I will cross over and I will defend Josh Manson against Mike McCarron, who is absolutely insufferable. Because there is a line that exists between a physical player taking a bad penalty and said player being dirty. One is about an act in the moment. One is about their entire reputation. And Mike McCarron last night on national television between the first and second period, just without, and good job, good journalism, PK Subban. Don't press your boy on it at all. that he just went on your airwaves and called Josh Manson a dirty player, and PK Subban's like cackling about it. Like that's an incendiary thing to say. You don't just like laugh that off. And it's just not true. But Mike McCarron, the aggrieved party in the matter, allegedly, went on ESPN, said that. And then if you missed it, don't worry because McCarron brought it back in the post-game locker room. I don't recall anybody else saying this. This thing that Mike McCarron is saying we should all accept as fact. I haven't heard it about Josh Manson. I'm not saying that he is well liked by opposing players, but he's not respected. He's a dirty player. Because if Mike McCarron goes on ESPN or in the post-game locker room says what Josh Manson did was dirty and he should have been kicked out of the game, I'm on his side because that could be a dirty act perpetrated by a player who isn't dirty. That happens sometimes. But the fact that McCarron blew it up into now Josh Manson is a dirty player and no one respects him. Like, again, first of all, there is a rule where you only get a double minor. But look, I didn't know that that was the case. So I'm not going to, drag Mike McCarron for it. But second of all, and more importantly, he's not characterizing Josh Manson correctly. Josh Manson, part of his reputation comes from his father, Dave. Quick history lesson: 72 fights, 2,800 penalty minutes. He was nicknamed Charlie, as in Charles Manson, was a mean player. Had a couple of famous run-ins with Scott Stevens, one where he threw his helmet at him and another one where he just pummeled him in the middle of the ice till he was bloodied. So Dave Manson, I think, while I was not around in his heyday, I would imagine some of the things he did that people viewed him as a dirty player. The sins of the father are visited upon the son in this case, and I think they're two separate players. If you're and Josh certainly has a reputation of being mean, physical, right? Dirty, no. Hasn't been suspended ever, still hasn't. The fine he got for butt ending, that $5,000, was his first fine in a decade. You want to throw around the word dirty. That's like when athletes throw around the word soft. If you call a player dirty, if you call a player soft, you better be ready to back it up with actual facts because them are fighting words. You don't call players dirty. You don't call them soft unless you're willing to back it up. And not having it turned around on you, Mike McCarron. You know Mike McCarron. Let me give you a history lesson on Mike McCarron. Suspended for 2 games for a check to the head of Yanni Gord. Or the Mike McCarron who's ejected from a game for a dangerous hit on Pavel Buchnevich. Mike McCarron has more in his past that would point to him being a dirty player than Josh Manson would. And by the way, McCarron, he said, but it looked to me like McCarron tackled him. That's my read on it. He tackled him, and Josh Manson swung his stick. He shouldn't have, but he swung his stick to try and get McCarron off of him. That's how I read the situation. So Mike McCarron is not blameless in this situation either, and he has more of a reputation for crossing the line than Josh Manson does. But here's the other part about this. If you're going to call a player dirty and say no one respects you, and you're going to be so angry that he put the butt end of his stick into the side of your face, then you are in the perfect sport, my friend, because you can do something about it. One of the great things about hockey, and don't let anyone tell you any differently, is the fact that dudes get to punch each other, that we allow for this in hockey. At the highest levels, of course, no fighting in Pee Wee hockey. Mike McCarron, to my knowledge, correct me if I'm wrong, did nothing about it. Now, I mentioned my son was watching the game with me. I'm like, oh, those two are going to fight. They're going to fight. It's obvious. Mike McCarron called him dirty. Mike McCarron's going to drop the gloves. We're going to see a good old-fashioned hockey fight in the middle of this game. Nothing. So Mike McCarron calls Josh Manson one of the worst things you could call a fellow athlete and then does nothing about it. Doesn't do anything to his face that we know about. I mean, maybe he said something. But in hockey, there is an apparatus in place where you can exact your revenge. And Mike McCarron didn't use it at any point for the rest of the game. So you're going to say that on national television to your buddy PK Subban, and then you're going to say it in the post-game locker room, neither of which time had Josh Manson been around. That's weak. That's weak stuff from Mike McCarron. And he didn't even respond in a different way. So you don't want to fight. Okay, fine. How about you do something about on the scoreboard and not lose the game? Mike McCarron did nothing about it. Meanwhile, the Avalanche, and I don't know if his comments got to the Avs in the first period intermission, but it seemed like the Avs, who felt like they were wronged in some way with what McCarron did to Josh Manson in the first place, they responded the right way. They beat them on the scoreboard. They didn't want to fight too. Okay. Fair enough. They went out and beat Mike McCarron in the Minnesota Wild. That's how you got to respond one of those two ways. Or else you leave yourself open to kind of looking bad in the whole situation, Mike McCarron. You either got to duke it out on the ice or you got to beat them on the scoreboard. Or else it just seems like you're chirping. And certainly this serves as a great lesson to athletes in every sport. When somebody from a team, I mean, this sounds oddly specific, but because it's the Wild, if an athlete from a team that calls the Twin Cities home calls you out, says something mean about you, you should probably find a way to retaliate in a healthy way. Between the lines, what's allowed. You should probably do that, or else it's just going to invite more people to clown on you. Now, I'm not naming any specific teams. I'm just saying if you get called out by an athlete that plays in Minnesota, you should probably find a way to respond one way or another. Avalanche did. Other teams, I would imagine, did not. And maybe it could be part of the reason why the Avalanche are still playing and the other team is not. Again, just completely hypothetical situation. Just pulling it out of thin air. But Mike McCarron, come on now. That was weak. That was weak last night. Don't like what Josh Manson did, certainly. But I really don't like what Mike McCarron said about him because it's just not true. Now, I can't also defend Josh Manson's intrusive thoughts, which won today when he was asked about this incident, and he said he wanted to punch McCarron in the head. But after what McCarron said, not once but twice last night, I can't say that I blame Josh Manson for feeling that way. 719-24-7, 1313. Take your thoughts on the Avs Game 4 win. We'll have more drive times after this. Join me tomorrow morning. Don't join me tomorrow morning. I got other things to do. Join me tomorrow afternoon from 3 to 6 as I broadcast the show live from the Brass Tap on Bass Pro Drive. Be getting you ready for Game 6, which could be the end of the Minnesota-Colorado series. Great drink specials like $3.50 pints, a Coors Light, Coors Banquet, Miller Lite, and Mountain Time. Giveaways, and just a chill time with many of your fellow Avs fans. So that'll be 3 to 6 tomorrow afternoon, the Brass Tap on Bass Pro Drive. I have to say, to be fair, that award season for the Colorado Avalanche has kind of picked up. I think that the NHL and the voters have done better recently than they did at the start. It was off to a very bad start. No Nathan MacKinnon for the Ted Lindsay, no Scott Wedgwood as a finalist for the Vezina, and it didn't look great. But Cale Makar, finalist for the Norris Trophy. Nathan MacKinnon, finalist for the Hart Trophy for MVP, which in a weird twist of fate, although I kind of feel this way most of the time, that the people covering the game sometimes know a little bit better than the people who play the game. And that's not because the people who play the game are like dumb about their sport. It's they're kind of in their own world. And people are paid to watch all of these games, and the athletes are kind of paid to play their own games. So I think sometimes, like I think about this when the NFL Top 100 comes out, I feel like listening to these players talk, they're just hyping up their buddies. And that's why we get some really weird players in certain spots on these NFL Top 100. And I'm not saying I don't want to hear from players. I hearing from your peers and what your peers think about you, I think is interesting. But sometimes, the people that get paid to watch these games and make it their living, their career, sometimes do a better job. And I will say that this year, the media did a little bit better than the players did in terms of picking two very similar awards in the Hart Trophy and Ted Lindsay. So Nathan MacKinnon's up for the Hart Trophy. And then today, Chris McFarland, and this is voted on. This is the other thing with NHL awards. They're all voted on by different people. So Ted Lindsay is the players. A lot of the other awards are from the writers, and apparently the GM of the year is voted on by other GMs. But Chris McFarland, Avalanche GM, has been recognized as a finalist for the GM of the year. He is going up against Pat Verbeek, who built the Anaheim Ducks, did a pretty good job of it, and Bill Guerin, who brought in Quinn Hughes. I mean, that's essentially his argument. I traded for Quinn Hughes. The biggest move of the season, easily. But in terms of the number of moves that were made that maybe add up to something greater, I think that that's where Chris McFarland has his case for this award. I don't think he's going to win. And quite frankly, I was a little bit surprised that he was, chosen, to be honest. Carolina's GM brought in Nikolai Ehlers, and you'll find out about this hopefully down the road when Carolina and Colorado meet in the Stanley Cup final. But Carolina put in some work this season to get to where they are. So I'm a little bit surprised that Chris McFarland got a finalist. But any reason to bring up what the moves he has made that have impacted the Colorado Avalanche, I'm good with. So he brings in Waugh and Kadri. right? Two important pieces to make this Avalanche team whole. He brought in Brett Kulak, that I think was a solid signing. Any one of them on their own probably doesn't make the case for him. But just think about the impact in the season, like when the Avs power play started humming, and they were one of the best power plays in the league. It coincided with Nazem Kadri. That was a big reason why. And I think Kulak has been a strong addition. And Nick Waugh, I know it's a regular season. I think it's a regular season award. But you look at the impact that Nick Waugh has made in the regular season, but especially here in the playoffs. What a great move that was. That move alone could have been, the best move of the year for the Colorado Avalanche, and you would have been good with it. And then Chris McFarland goes out and gets Nazem Kadri as well. Like, I don't know that Chris McFarland has the best case this year. I think Chris McFarland last year had a better case than this year. But he lost last year to Jim Nill because Jim Nill acquired Mikko Rantanen with nobody paying attention to the fact that Chris McFarland was able to deal Mikko Rantanen and get Natchez and get Brock Nelson down the road. I think Chris McFarland's year was last year to win, not necessarily this one. But there's no doubt that the moves that Chris McFarland has made have been impactful. And Nazem Kadri, speaking of Kadri on the power play, specifically made a big impact last night. Here's Jared Bednar talking about the impact on special teams that Nazem Kadri has made. And the Avs got another power play goal on the board last night in that 5-2 win. So, I mean, Chris McFarland, for the work he has done over the last couple of years, deserves a nod. I don't think he's going to win. I think it'll be Bill Guerin because, again, Jim Nill got Mikko Rantanen, and that was the biggest move of last year, and he ended up winning. So my guess is Bill Guerin ends up with it. And I think the Olympics, as much as they're not supposed to, I think factor in a little bit here. And of course, Bill Guerin did a phenomenal job building Team USA's roster that eventually won a gold medal. So, all told here, I would trade Chris McFarland's spot for Scott Wedgwood. I think Scott Wedgwood more deserving of the Vezina Trophy, being a Vezina Trophy finalist than Chris McFarland is for the Rutherford Award given to the best general manager. But there's no doubt that Chris McFarland is certainly worthy of inclusion in the conversation and was once again active at the deadline. We always ask, especially with that other team that calls Ball Arena home, we love it when a team doesn't stand pat, when a team keeps adding, when they have the ability to add and don't, say, woe is us and we can't do anything. Chris McFarland always finds a way, and you appreciate what he has done. I think unequivocally, and that's not to say that there aren't other good general managers, George Payton, in the state of Colorado, Chris McFarland is the best at what he does in this state. I think I don't think that's a hot take. I think Chris McFarland is great at what he does. And there was some question about that with Joe Sakic, kind of stepping aside. How was this Chris McFarland guy going to be? Man, rare are the misses. Middle stat for Byram. That might be one. Not many other than that. Big reason why the Avalanche have the team that is now sitting one win away from the Western Conference Final. Take your thoughts, 719-247-1313. Coming up next, our one deviation from hockey today because we now know who the Broncos are going to be opening this season with, when the Broncos are going to be opening the season, and for some reason, after those other two key pieces of information, we found out where the Broncos are going to be opening their season. So we'll get into that coming up next on 740 KVOR and Extra Sports 1300. Territory Days celebrates its 50th anniversary in Old Colorado City, May 23rd through the 25th. Enjoy free admission, live music, great food, a beer and wine garden, vendors, gold panning, and so much more. Territory Days is sponsored by Air Force Reserve, Huberger Subaru, and America's Affordable Building Supply. Celebrate Memorial Day weekend in Old Colorado City with Territory Days. Not that something like this would influence your decision. More of a warning than anything else. I will be out at Territory Days on Sunday, so may see you there. Hope to see you there, but I know that is not going to move you in the direction of going as much as the food and kid zone and things like that will. And that's fine. I've made peace with it. Starting right now, before I get into the Broncos, we may have the most lopsided pitching matchup in recent MLB history. The Colorado Rockies today are starting, they're just underway in Pittsburgh, and they are facing reigning Cy Young winner, former Air Force Falcon, Paul Skeens. Okay? Widely considered the best at what he does. The Rockies are countering with Michael Lorenzen, who has an ERA at almost 7. So, now the good news is Michael Lorenzen is facing the Pirates lineup and not Paul Skeens. They're not matching each other pitch for pitch. It's like when quarterbacks match up. We talk about quarterback matchups, but they actually don't influence one another that much. But I saw that pitching matchup and I was like, whoa, can you get further away from one another than Michael Lorenzen and Paul Skeens? And watch, the Rockies win tonight. Book it. Book it. Rockies win. Michael Lorenzen, 6 1/3 shutout ball. Paul Skeens doesn't make it out of the first. That's how these things tend to work. So that's underway. And then there's this piece of news. The Denver Broncos are going to be opening the season on Monday Night Football against the Kansas City Chiefs. And I would say, if we stop right there, perfect, right? It's a great matchup. Here's the problem. Games in Arrowhead. And that has some Broncos fans a little bit bothered. I am on your side. I think that the perfect scenario is that the Broncos open up at home in primetime against the Kansas City Chiefs. It is a little bit weird to me that the Broncos are going to Kansas City. I get the schedule is kind of random, and you know, Chiefs fans will counter with, well, Chiefs, when they won, you know, go to the Super Bowl and stuff, they didn't start at home. Okay, but that I'm not about the whataboutism. Okay, if I see a matchup, given what happened last year, and this is what the NFL should be doing, setting up the storylines for this year, right? You have the reigning Super Bowl champions open at home, maybe against a team that you may deem is one of their biggest threats. And then you litter your primetime schedule with sexy matchups between teams that you think people should be watching, and you set the tone for the season. You allow us to get off and running with narratives and overreacting and all the things we love to do after week 1 of the NFL season. The perfect scenario would be on Monday Night Football, the Kansas City Chiefs visit the Denver Broncos. The Broncos have now unseated Kansas City at the top of the AFC West, but don't count out those pesky Chiefs. They're reloading. They're coming back to take what is theirs. Like, it writes itself. But the correct venue for that should be Denver. As an attaboy to the Denver Broncos for, making the AFC Championship. Now, it's not like, look, I'd rather that the Broncos open, and I think you would too, rather the Broncos open up the season against Kansas City and Kansas City than to open up the season at home against the Carolina Panthers. Like, this game feels like it means something. It's exciting. So the venue, while I agree, doesn't make the most sense, I think it's a perfect way for both the Broncos and the Chiefs to start the season. And now that rivalry is truly back, because I'm sorry, beating Kansas City 1 out of 2 times when Kansas City goes on to go to the Super Bowl and the Denver Broncos miss the playoffs, that's not the rivalry being back. Denver doing what they did to Kansas City last year, although there are some, we'll get into, I don't want to belabor the point here, but there were some circumstances surrounding some of these games. But the fact is, the Denver Broncos won the AFC West, unseeded Kansas City. First time Kansas City hasn't finished atop their division in forever. The Broncos-Chiefs rivalry is back in full effect. It is a thing, and these are the two teams that are going to be battling it out this year for the AFC West crown, I believe. So I think it's a great first game. Great first game. How many dumb NFC games do we get week 1? I believe Vance Joseph built up some early goodwill because he was playing like 3 NFC teams at home in the first month of the season. Like, let's stack it. We know that these games aren't going to be, these matchups aren't going to be as good 5, 6, 7 weeks into the season. Let's make sure that we get some good ones now. Although, here's the funny thing about this. And I tweeted this out. Give it a like if you want to boost my self-esteem for the day. There's a non-zero chance that this is Justin Fields against Jarrett Stidham. Did no one in the NFL office consider that there is a distinct possibility that it is Justin Fields against Jarrett Stidham? Both quarterbacks have, their teams will tell you that they're good to go. Don't worry. Don't panic. They're all good to go. Brett Veach is basically stopping short of calling Patrick Mahomes superhuman for the way he's recovered from his ACL. The Broncos will tell you that everything with Bo Nix is fine. They are both coming off of significant injuries. Bo Nix has gone in for more work on his ankle. This is, I in theory, I love this matchup. And I do believe that it will be Bo Nix against Patrick Mahomes. But we're on May 12th. A lot of time to go. A lot of things can happen. Could you imagine if great matchup, Arrowhead or Geehaw or whatever the crap they're calling it, now they're just calling it Field because the World Cup doesn't let you call your stadium by your sponsors' names. Just another great thing about FIFA. You got all this stuff, and then it's Justin Fields and Jarrett Stidham because Mahomes and Bo Nix are hurt. And I told Ray this, and I'm not afraid to say it on air. If it turned out that Mahomes isn't ready for week 1 and Bo Nix is, Justin Fields beating the Denver Broncos Monday night of week 1, it may fix me. It would be my Super Bowl. I'm not afraid. I'm proud to say it. If Justin Fields in a Chiefs uniform beats Bo Nix and the Denver Broncos on Monday Night Football to open the season, I'd be good. That would be it. I'd be all right for the rest of my life It would be the pinnacle of my fandom. And maybe the very low point of yours if you're a Denver Broncos fan. But we'll see. But it looks like it will be Mahomes and Knicks, and that's a great matchup to open the season. And it's the least they can do after they're continue to shove these stupid international games down our throats. What else? Yeah, I think that's all. I think that's all I had in this segment for you. Again, I want to remind you tomorrow afternoon, I'll be doing the show from 3 to 6 at the Brass Tap. Would love to see you out there. Ray would love to see you out there. Ray will be there. So if you don't come out to the Brass Tap for me, come out for Ray. And yeah, let's have some fun leading up to Game 6 between the Avs and the Wild. Chance for the Avs to close things out. What a performance last night. We'll get more into that tomorrow and look forward to Game 6 as well. Or Game 5. What am I talking about? Don't shortchange the Avs, Ryan. Game 5. In the meantime, if on another note, if you're thinking about testosterone therapy, here's something that you need to hear. Not all clinics, not all testosterone replacement therapy is the same. It's become a little bit of a hot industry right now. Maybe you've seen. I'm here to tell you at Low T Center, they set the standard. They've been doing this for longer than just about anyone, and it shows. They only use high-quality pharmaceutical-grade testosterone, never compounded products, no guesswork, no mystery ingredients, just treatment you can trust. And their providers, all board certified. They're experts in hormone health. They know exactly what to look for, what tests to run, and how to keep everything balanced so that you feel your best. And on top of that, they're getting into the peptide game. And you know that they have the highest quality of these as well. GLP-1s, that's the ones we already know, but there are a lot of other ones that can help benefit your life in a lot of ways: weight loss, recovery, overall wellness. So if you're ready basically to feel like yourself again, that's what this is about. If you want to feel like yourself again, don't settle for one of these fly-by nights just trying to get in while the getting's good. Go to the original, trust the experts at Low T Center. You could get your free T-test, get it all started with no risk. lowtcenter.com. That's lowtcenter.com. And book that initial appointment today. Get a blood test, figure out what's what, and they'll help you along the way. Coming up next, my thoughts on a supremely good Game 5 from the Colorado Avalanche. You're listening to 740 KVOR and Extra Sports 1300.